Hey, I'm Jeff, and I make music with my brother.
Hi, I'm Jonathan, and I also make music with my brother.
Together, we are Ekko and Sidetrack, and we make music that sounds like this.
And this.
And even this. This podcast is about music, creativity, and everything in between.
Welcome to A Band Apart with Ekko and Sidetrack. This week's episode of A Band Apart with Ekko and Sidetrack is brought to you by our brand new remix, What's So Not and DMA's The Change, the Ekko and Sidetrack remix. It's available everywhere. Go listen to it on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, SoundCloud, wherever you stream your music, and get your party on. As always, this episode of A Band Apart with Ekko and Sidetrack is sponsored by Short Order Burger Co. Use the code word Metaverse for 10% off in-store at either the Hay Street store or the Fremantle store. Yet again, that's code word Metaverse for 10% off when you order at the counter. Tell them Ekko and Sidetrack sent you and enjoy your burger. Jeff, 2 weeks ago, a remix came out we did. What was that remix?
That song was The Change by What's So Not featuring the DMAs. What's So Not and the DMAs. And we remixed it, and we're Ekko and Sidetrack.
Freak yeah, we are. It was a great remix to do, and we thought we'd start today's podcast by chatting about it a little bit, how it came about, how we felt about doing it, how we feel about the outcome, talk you through the process a little bit. So, Jeff, how did we first meet Chris What's So Not?
Well, if you wind it back, I actually met him when I was in Japan last year for Snow Machine through our young friend Carl the Shocker Thomas, and chatted with him a little bit there, but didn't really know him very well. And then he actually did a quarantine in the studio complex that we have a studio in. He basically did 2 weeks where he didn't leave the studio and locked all the doors, and we had to have a protocol when someone went to the bathroom or used the kitchen and stuff like that. So we started a big group thread where we'd chat, and then sometimes I'd bring him food or something, and sometimes we'd briefly talk through the glass like he was in prison. And so just as he hung out more in Perth, because he was after the quarantine, he decided to stay here and use it as a bit of a home base, and because he was renting Carl's studio in the off-peak hours, he was around when I was around as well.
Yep.
And this is before you came back, and then we just started talking more, and he'd show me some stuff, and I'd show him some stuff, and build up a bit of a relationship like that, and it was really cool. It's it's how you'd want to meet a fellow musician.
Yeah.
You start by talking about music, and then you're talking about the wider world, and then his girlfriend came over and stayed, and we get on really well with her, and then all of a sudden we're just talking about life, and then you have a relationship with someone.
Yeah. No, I think it's how we've made a lot of our music friends. They become life friends first.
Well, you realize you have a little common bond in the music, and then you start talking about stuff, and you want to show, it's like you're a kid again. Oh, have you heard this?
Yeah.
Have you heard this? And then the remix kind of came about because, Jonathan?
We had heard the song because, as Jeff said, we would show Chris stuff, and Chris would show us music that he's working on, and we'd heard the song before it came out. And I think before the song came out, we were listening to it, and I can't remember if it was me or you, or if who messaged each other, but we said to one another, this needs a drum and bass remix. I keep hearing this at 174. You might have said that in passing when we heard it before it came out, but then I remember playing it for you in the car. Yeah.
When we were driving to the studio, probably 3 weeks or maybe 2.5 weeks after you got out of quarantine or something. And I was like, oh, this is Chris's tune.
Yeah.
The one, it's now on Spotify. And you were like, man, it'd be sick to remix. So I think that's when you said the first time to me.
You that we should do this as a remix. And then I think probably like within a few days of saying that, maybe we were driving to the studio or from the studio within a few days, we just went down and said to Chris, like, hey, we think this should have a drum and bass remix. Can we remix it? And he was like, sure.
Can we give it a crack? Because
yeah,
bring the listener up on how remixes sometimes work, is they're often done on spec, or like, you know, the producer would send the stems, the parts for a song, and then the remixer like gets a chance or sees if anything good comes of it. Because sometimes not all songs come together, and you know they might not get finished or whatever.
Or sometimes the artist doesn't like the remix.
Exactly.
The remix that's done. So usually the parts get sent out to
a bunch of people,
a bunch of producers, and then they all do remixes, and then they come back, and then the label and the artist would choose the top couple that they like.
I actually found out someone else who was going to do a drum and bass remix of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Flight was going to do a drum and bass remix.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was like, oh, it just never came together.
Justin Hawkes.
Yeah, Justin Hawkes.
Yeah, so, and Chris was like, yeah, sure. Gave us the parts straight away.
Gave us the parts and then gave us a deadline. Which is another remix thing. It's like, yeah, of course you can remix it. It needs to be done in a week.
Yeah. And so I think I started it maybe that Wednesday and was playing with... We've obviously done a lot of remixes and bootlegs, and whenever we go to do one, if it's not glaringly obvious to us straight away, sometimes it's not glaringly obvious what you should do with it.
Mm.
And I think for this one, we often have, before we go do a remix, we often think it should just be a drum and bass version of the song, because what a remix should do is to bring some of Chris's marker over to us, and it should appease to some degree the people that like the original, but now put it in drum and bass land.
But it should also bring some of Chris's writing, a different element of Chris's writing to the forefront.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've turned off, you know, essentially you could turn off some bits and be like, I'm going to focus in on that sound that's not particularly prominent in the original or something.
Yeah.
It's literally a chance to remix the parts.
Yeah. It should be an evolution of the original song. So they're still kind of connected in some way. A good remix should be an evolution. And I think originally the first version of it, or the first couple of versions of it, were probably a bit safe, I think. I think originally I was playing with some of the distorted harmonic kind of bass, which ended up being in the final version. But we played with that a little bit, and then we went to full-on kind of dance floor, not really much distorted bass, and it was more musical and based on the musical parts of the song, which is mostly the intro. And I remember showing Chris, and he was like, be more experimental, like push things around. And that was quite cool, because it was the first time we'd had the person that did the original actually in the studio to give us direct feedback.
Yeah, to be like, oh yeah, I like that sound. Focus in on that sound. I'm like, oh, okay.
And it kind of allowed us to be like, oh, well, you know, we were going a bit safe with the original concept.
For sure.
And I think as we started to push the song in a more interesting direction, and as the deadline loomed, because originally the deadline was
8 days.
I think it was 8 days.
And then that changed over time as some other people were holding up to deliver their mixes in time and stuff like that. But we were up here making changes till the kind of last minute. But like you said, having Chris here, and you could tell he was getting more excited about the song, because he'd come up and be like, "What are you guys working? Oh, that, yeah. Oh, man, you should try this." And like, he'd show us some bits, or he'd help push us, not in a direction, but like inspire a new idea. Like I've been definitely pushing sounds a lot more since seeing how he works in the studio.
Yeah.
And I've been quite inspired by that. And I think it was super, super integral in getting that song to where it finished up.
I remember maybe it was a night session that I wasn't here for. And I don't know if you put the video on Instagram or if you showed it to me the next day, but you and Chris were playing with the MS-20 and basically recording a bunch of screaming textures, some of which are in the song at quite a low volume. Others are, it's actually like part of the main bass screaming sound that ended up being the main focus of the song. And I think having someone else in the studio definitely allows you to experiment a bit more and go off the beaten path a bit. I think sometimes we're so quick to we're getting better at it, but so quick to stop each other from doing something strange.
I totally agree. I think seeing someone else work all of a sudden gives you permission to do something new.
Yeah, absolutely.
Watching how someone uses a certain plugin or a piece of equipment, you're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Or, oh, that's what that button does. It's the same way in some respects that people didn't think you could run a 4-minute mile. And then that one guy, I can't remember his name, ran a 4-minute mile, and then more and more people started being able to run a 4-minute mile. It what was once impossible became possible, and then it's like, oh yeah, I can do that. It's
it gives you permission.
It gives you permission, and I think that's really cool to watch someone work, particularly someone at Chris's level. And being in the studio with him, we'd sit there and be like, that's a weird way to do that, or that's a strange thing. And you'd ask him, he's like, oh yeah, this, and this, and you're like, huh. Never thought about it like that. And you got a little bit of a peek into how his kind of brain works. I think that was exciting and inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely, just seeing how other people work. One of the reasons why production tutorials that are more based in people going through their original songs or showing their work process is so popular, because it suddenly shows you that maybe what you're doing isn't that dumb. I know sometimes we do things and you're like,
that's wrong.
Yeah, that's wrong. Yeah. But there really is no wrong way to do it.
Absolutely.
If you're hearing something with your ears and want to bring something out, whether you do it with an EQ or whether you do it with a distortion or whether you do it with another layer, there's no real correct way to do it. It's however you get to the end goal of having more top end to that sound is fine.
Or more interest in the sound.
Or more interest in the sound. Every producer is going to get there differently. Half the battle is just allowing space and allowing patience with yourself and confidence to get there the way you're getting there.
For sure. So how did you feel playing the remix? We played the remix for the first time properly at Dimension in front of just over 2,000 people.
Yeah, that was the first time we played it, hey?
Yeah. And we'll probably post that video on our socials soon.
Great. Really, really great. Felt like it was done. It was probably the quickest turnaround we've had for a song from getting the project to playing the finished project out.
Yeah.
And being like, it's finished. I felt good. I felt ownership of the song. I felt like, fuck yeah, we smashed this. And people like it, and it hits hard. It works.
Yeah.
I think seeing Chris's feedback on it was also very...
And seeing Chris play it and seeing other people play it.
Yeah, seeing
really positive.
Boris played it, seeing Chris play it, seeing people get excited about it.
Because you can create something and it becomes not yours after it's out in the ether.
Yeah.
And how it's received is up to anyone else. Sorry. Yeah, I suppose its quality is, you can't judge its quality. Whatever it becomes for other people is their thing. You can't tell someone else that it's like, it's this kind of a song. It's like, it's a good one. It's a banger. It does this. Whatever it becomes for someone else is what it is.
Yeah, and that's why you have to be okay with what it is personally.
Yeah, and your judgment on it kind of doesn't matter anymore. Because I struggled with it. I think I just got too close to it towards the end, and then I was like, is it good? Is it not? Is it? But the fact that I cared so much meant that it was.
But that's also kind of your cycle. Like every single tune we write,
I always say the faster I oscillate between loving it and hating it means it's slowly zeroing in on being done.
Yeah. And you're like, always towards the end, you're like, fuck, I don't think this song's good. Or something like that. There's always a moment where you, more so than me, say, I hate this song.
Yeah.
Which maybe for you is that's your path.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit
to the end.
Because if I feel indifferent to the song, then it doesn't move me. I'd rather love it or hate it. I think that's if everyone thinks it's okay, then nobody loves it or nobody hates it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's definitely true. I do like the fact that it was a remix of all the bootlegs and remixes we've done in the past 2 years. It was heavier. If you look at like the 17 bootleg or the Rushing Back bootleg, both are kind of lighter, more melodic based things. And then it was cool to do a remix and use our remix skill to make a heavier song because we haven't really done that since we did the Tarantula remix.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool to have, 4 remixes done, 2 are melodic, 2 are heavy. It kind of closes a loop on that in some ways in my mind. I'm really glad we didn't go down the purely melodic route with it.
It's a better song for it.
Absolutely.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, imagine that. You've gotten this far in and you're like, what are they talking about? The song is, as we said earlier, The Change by What's So Not in the D Maze. It's the Ekko and Sidetrack remix, and you can check it out wherever you get your music, and we implore you to. And thank you for all the great comments and the streams and what so not. If I can just ramp it up or ramp it down, I'm not sure what I'm doing by asking you this question, but I've been thinking a lot about something recently, and that thing is the metaverse. I've been seeing that pop up, that terminology pop up a lot more online or in podcasts and stuff. Facebook want to be
what do you
leaders of the metaverse and all these things. And I'm like, what the fuck is the metaverse? Like, what is this? What are we looking at? And so I was a little bit confused. And so I did a little bit of looking into what this whole metaverse thing's about. I don't pretend to know anything, but I wanted to know what you thought the metaverse was, or what is the metaverse to you? What do you think when you hear that?
Well, from what I understand the metaverse to be is...
Have you heard the term?
I have heard the term, and it's just the digital universe that we kind of have been creating since the birth of the internet. So it's, what started in message boards and social media and now what is it? Big multiplayer.
Massive
multiplayer games like World of Warcraft or
things like Fortnite and
like
Minecraft.
Like bigger. It's basically like online communities that are now growing into spaces that are more visual based.
Yeah.
And that's leading towards something that can be tangibly compared to the current universe or the current reality that we're all existing in.
That's a really good explanation. Yeah, that's essentially it. So there's a lot of chat about, now as computer processing power gets better and better, and the worlds are already being created. And this sounds so crazy to talk. Just stick with me on this, listener. I don't know. Yeah, it's blowing my mind as I say it. But like, essentially, worlds are being created within games that are now online. And then they're also attaching other aspects, other worlds to them. So they're communities that people are spending more and more time in, to the point where they're happy to, spend real money in them. They're happy to socialize in them, and that's like a suitable level of socializing. It's not like you're a nerd and you're locked in your basement and you're doing nothing but chatting to people on Merc or AOL. This is like, no, me and my friends meet online and we do this thing.
And it feeds tangible social interaction points.
So these worlds, that are being created are like literally now starting to get spoken about in the wider thing as things like, every time I try and talk about this, my brain just goes, and like I can't quite string sentences together. But like, cryptocurrency and things like that are products of the metaverse that will be used in the metaverse. So think of just a digital world.
And all the utilities that need to go with that digital world.
Yeah. So
it's kind of like the Wild West and like finding of a new world. You know, you think about people that got to America and started moving west. And before there was governments in some towns, Deadwood's been on my mind. That's why I'm using this example. Before the government was really made or controlled, there were just these towns that were wild. There's a bar and a brothel, and the local bootlegger or the local owner of the bar ran the town, and it was wild. There was no real law. It was just people did whatever the fuck they wanted and kind of governed themselves to a certain extent.
Exactly,
governing, which is what the internet is, but utilities like crypto or things like that are kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Legitimizing these places and legitimizing the metaverse.
Yeah. You bringing up the Wild West is an interesting point, actually, Jonathan, because one of the things about the metaverse is that it does thrive on open source programming, but also decentralization. So one of the big things with cryptocurrency is that no one has the final say, I suppose. There's no one governing body for crypto, and all of the calculations are done by the community. And so the concept of the wider metaverse is that it'll be decentralized computing. That is computing a word? Decentralized programs that kind of like hold it together and connect it all. So if you think of the mini metaverse of Minecraft existing, the wider metaverse of the thing they're building towards, and Minecraft exists in that universe, but Minecraft has its own language within the thing. So it's like visiting a certain country inside the metaverse. I'm going to the Minecraft place. I'm going to this other thing. The reason I bring this up is I just think it's kind of fucking mind-blowing that in our time on Earth, there are literally people going like, oh no, let's get heaps and heaps of developers together and let's spend a shitload of money. Like the makers of Fortnite and Sony are working on creating a new world that's going to be like, VR focused, and, there's people selling land inside their inside their worlds for real money. And that land, that real estate is going to be in the future like primary real estate as you get out of the essentially land at the airport of the metaverse. In your VR, you come into the world, and then that primary real estate is right there. All of a sudden, you got to imagine a giant billboard for Sony, because they're paying that owner of that land money to put their billboard there. And then you walk off and you go and find your game, or you go and do whatever you're doing.
It's like the next stage of digital marketing. If you think about,
But don't even think about marketing. Just think of it. Just think of it as existence. Like,
yeah, but I'm talking about what you're specifically saying. A billboard out the front of the gateway to the metaverse as you walk into the VR space that is this new world they're creating, and there's a massive billboard for Coca-Cola. That's the future version of Coke being the ad you see on a popular YouTube video.
yeah,
And the ad before the popular YouTube video is the future version of what having a physical billboard was 20 years ago.
exactly.
It's like it's the evolution. And it's funny because the evolution ends up back at the starting point of being a thing in a physical space, or a kind of physical space, even though it's still a digital space.
Yeah. So another way to think about the kind of metaverse is that Instagram is a metaverse.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of boring. It's just flat, and it's just a bunch of photos and text. So what they're aiming for is something similar to like Ready Player One, where you like go in there and it's like it has all the tropes of physical things. Like you go visit the library and you can attend lectures and you can pick up books and you can, wear certain clothes and buy certain things and, wear certain skins and become different characters in this world that you couldn't do in the quote unquote real world. One thing is that someone has set up a casino in this Decentraland, which is a place. They set up a casino and you play slots and everything like that. I think it's a like kind of like a looking thing, like there's a visual aspect to it. It's probably pretty crude at the moment, but you can buy shares in a slot machine. So I could own part of a percentage of a slot machine. So every time it takes money, I make money. That's just something that doesn't exist in this world, in the real world. Another example is Nike have taken out a patent on digital shoes. No, what am I trying to say? The next thing that the metaverse allows is further integration of digital and physical, and adding rules or programming to actions. And what I mean by that is like, currently if I sell you a piece of art, you buy it off me for $1,000 and you go, it's really good. I think it's going to be worth $10,000 in 10 years because Jeff's a really good artist. And you buy that thing and then you hang it in your house and then you sell it. That's it. It's transaction. That's the way the transaction works. As we move towards digital, a more predominant digital world with things like the blockchain and stuff like that, which is just a way to add programming language to another thing. By the way, I'm probably butchering this and my brain is, but I could sell you that piece of art and then I could add a piece of like a rule, a program to it that says when Jonathan sells that piece of art, I get paid 10% of that sale as well, and the next sale and the next sale.
It's like the future version of a timeshare in a holiday home. But you're not using the holiday home. You've just invested in this thing, this piece of art or this slot machine with 10,000 other people. Yeah. And everyone's just making a little bit micro profits.
But okay. No, but think not just profits. Think of adding rules to any action. So I buy a pair of shoes in real life, and then that means I can own them in the digital realm as well. It means I can wear my Nikes in the digital realm. They're really exclusive, so I feel really fancy when I'm walking around the metaverse. And I feel pretty fancy when I'm in reality as well. But in the metaverse, I can actually change their color and mash them up with other shoes. And then they become worth more if I mash them up with like rarer shoes or something like that. And then they're only existing in the digital realm. But maybe Nike would allow you to actually create those shoes, like minting them for the real world, and that would put physical value on them. But they were completely created inside the digital realm first, and they have a value and all sorts of stuff. Like I said,
the possibilities.
Endless. Exactly. That's the craziest thing about all of this is there are so many possibilities of not just commerce or advertising or games. This is something that in our lifetime will probably be a reality, literally, that you can go and visit. That is a pretty good place to go and a viable place to exist.
I always find it interesting, invariably with these conversations, because basically what you're talking about is something like The Matrix. The Matrix or Ready Player One, Ready Player One's a bit more crude because you put on a goggles and you're on a kind of omnidirectional pad and you move around a space. But what if it's...
But that's got to go through the crude version first.
Absolutely. But essentially it's going to get to the space of the Matrix where you plug something in and your consciousness is digitized to some extent.
Yeah.
That's probably going to be where it's at. So it's interesting you talk about having something in the real world, having your Nikes that you really love in the real world, and then you've got the same shoes in the digital world, and you upgrade them in the digital world. If this world, the metaverse, becomes almost exactly the same as the reality we're living in, except, you can travel to different planets where different rules of physics are applied.
And you could be a dragon.
And you can be a dragon, and you can have, there's even tactile functions, so you can feel there and you can touch.
We haven't even touched on sex, yeah.
And whatever. Why would you even bother getting the original physical shoes in the first place?
Yeah, how much time are you spending in the physical?
And why would someone who's 10 years old, who's 10 in 50 years, maybe our grandkids, why would someone who has, by the click of a button or jacking into something and goes, you can go fly, you can be literally anything you want to be, and you can do anything you want. Why would that person ever choose to do anything in the real world?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's actually made me think a lot about the yearning for freedom that everyone seems to have. Like, we're always looking for somewhere else to be free, but also looking for community in places. Like, more and more digital communities are becoming popular, and we're looking for approval and acceptance in the digital realm
From like-minded people.
Our tribe, if you will. But I heard Neil Stevenson talk on a short podcast I listened to the other day. This is kind of where my brain got triggered by all this metaverse chat.
And Neil Stevenson is a sci-fi
author and a futurist, and really, he's maybe the guy that coined the term metaverse in his book Snow Crash. But he's an amazing author. But he kind of said this point that freedom. The podcaster asked him about space. The guy was like, "Do you think space is the next frontier for humans?" And he says, "I'm not sure that people understand that space isn't freedom. Space is even more control because of all the things that we need to survive up there. It's like going into a nuclear sub. It's like, yeah, you're in a nuclear sub and you can go anywhere underwater and whatever.
But the variables for survival increase, and also
you're locked in a tiny fucking tube.
The technology that's needed and the amount of control you need to survive in space or on another planet is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like, why would we leave this gravity well to go to another gravity well? As in, like, a gravity well is in like something a planet. But it made me think about how people escape into their games or whatever. But then if you just go outside, and this is not some big metaphor for like spend more time outside, but like if you do just go outside and just like pretend for a moment that you're in an alternate reality, and you're like, okay, I play a little fucking mind game with yourself and be like, I'm in this alternate reality where I am this person, I am a music producer, I have a studio here, and this is my car. And that's my girlfriend, and these are my friends, and I'm going to go socialize with this person. You're doing that existence here in the most free way, real, tangible way possible. Yet we seem obsessed with just wanting to find like the next level, whether it's up or down, to be part of the community.
How do we know that we're not currently in the metaverse? And we're in the game that we've created. And actually what's happened is that thousands of years ago, we're doing what we're doing now and want to create a new universe with any possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happened is we've got to a point where we've recognized as a society that too many possibilities isn't good. And what we need is simple control variables. It's like we've recognized
we need gravity, we need lifespan.
We need lifespan because if you live forever, it's pointless and nothing matters. So what we need is these controls that we once had. Therefore, let's make that game. And you know what's even funner about that game is if we make it so when you're playing, you forget that you're actually playing a game. So let's do that. And then we've all jacked in. And now we're playing that game. And then within the game, we've gotten to a point where we're like, we need something more.
We should create a game.
So it's like this fractal babushka doll, cube within a cube within a cube within a cube thing of just perpetually chasing something.
Yeah.
And what we're probably chasing is the inevitability of death and the fear of the end. And also the fear of life to some extent. It's funny you say that you could go outside and pretend it's a video game. So what would you do differently? What would you do differently right now if it was a video game? You'd probably take more chances.
Yeah.
Because there was the idea that you could have a save point. And maybe you wouldn't fear death so much because it wasn't real.
And not saying that I'd go and jump off a bridge.
No, but you might do something. Your risk, you would be less risk averse.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah.
So what happens if you just live the life now with those parameters in your head, that it is a video game, that you can ask that girl out on a date because the rejection doesn't matter because it's not real. Or you can strive for that promotion at work. Or you can stand up in the middle of a crowded room and yell something silly.
And you can, live your life to the absolute fullest because
it's a video game.
It's a video game. Yeah.
What do you think stops that thought from being a thought that's actionable with a lot of people? I mean, I think a lot of people have got that thought and can action on that. But even as I say it, and as someone who does believe that that's probably the situation we're in, there's still that part of me that's like grounded in realism and maybe a bit cynical that goes.
And safe. It's back to what we were talking about right at the start with the remix. It's permission.
So if someone came up to you and said, hey, man, I'm a fucking programmer and I know, and they could prove that this is a video game.
No, not saying that. It's permission. Like, that's why watching someone do something great inspires you. That's what inspiration is. It's like permission to also be good. It's like, oh, I've been operating at a level 5, and then you see someone operating at a level 10, and you're like, I think I could go to 6 and maybe 7.
Yeah.
Like,
rather than, yeah, absolutely.
So maybe that's what the thing inside the game is, and that's what we're here to realize our potential.
So for you, is the course of action to embrace the metaverse, or is the course of action to embrace the current universe as the metaverse before you embrace the metaverse?
I think the latter, but the former is also happening. Like, the metaverse is coming.
You can't resist the metaverse.
It's inevitable, and the reason it's so scary is because it's new and it's going to happen to some degree. Resisting the metaverse is like holding on to the concept that cars are just a passing fad and that my horse will always be the best form of transport.
Yeah.
And not saying that you'll be completely left behind as a Luddite, as someone who resists technology, but there is a certain amount of awareness and wonder that I think should be embraced and be like, whoa, I want to see what this new thing is. And like, because it's probably coming in a lot weirder ways. And a lot of people, people might hear this and be like, that doesn't appeal to me. I don't play games or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but until something within that world appeals to you.
What happens if
that's when you'll be like, oh, that's actually kind of interesting. It's like people go like, oh, I don't, like a particular kind of music or something. And then you hear the right thing and you're like, whoa, I'm going to dive in on that.
I reckon it's funny because this also relates to a short story I'm listening to at the moment, a series of short stories. It's called Exhalation by Ted Chiang. And there's a short story within that group. It's really good for anyone that likes sci-fi. There's a short story within that grouping of stories called The Life Cycle of Software Objects. And it's about these digital pets that they make, and they're already in a kind of, there's a digital world and the real world, but I don't know how good quality the digital world is. It seems like people are still living quite happily in the real world. And they're talking about these digital pets that they're kind of cultivating and turning them more sentient, and they're educating them.
AI and stuff.
And AI, and it's very interesting. There's a bit in the book where they start talking about using these pets or using the code that these pets are based on for sex bots, essentially.
Because the code has become very good AI learning code.
And like showing you real love,
yeah,
and that kind of thing, rather than the before the sex bots they're using are all kind of based on input, so they'll like what they're given to some extent, which isn't satisfactory for the customer.
Yeah,
and it made me think, like, you might be resistant to video games, you might be resistant to technology to a certain extent, but sex, which is, I think, a base, very primordial base thing that most of us need or most of us desire, and probably the reason why we're motivated to do a lot of things. Once you get someone on side with that, then I think it's going to be inescapable to exist without outside the metaverse. If you're like say that can suddenly allow you whatever sexual proclivity you have, you can explore in a safe environment, and you can finally fulfill that need or fulfill that desire without shame or without feeling anything, then people are going to sign up for this thing 100%. You create a world where you can have sex with a Pokemon and have a romantic relationship with Pikachu.
Think of the celebrities, the celebrity porn that already exists, the deep fake porn that already exists. It started with, people doing bad photoshops of nude Meryl Streep into, all the celebrities. Now it's like videos of, you can see Cameron Diaz do all the things in video and it's very believable.
Yeah.
And that's what people want. That's like, and people want to exist in this.
And then what happens when you can sell your likeness to, so a company would license the likeness of you. So they could say someone wanted to have sex with Ekko and Sidetrack, and we could say, yeah, we'll sell our license. So every time someone creates a sex robot in the digital world that looks like one of us, we get a bit of money and they have sex with us, and we could even load them up with our personal proclivities.
Or you could even have another layer, would be someone in the real world, an actor in the real world playing you. Because the next level would be that, I know what the program does. I see what it is. I need a real actor
doing that
playing
thing.
The digital character, but I need them to wear that skin.
That wouldn't matter if we're plugged in, if we're jacked in and our mind is there, because then all our nerves in the brain is just a giant electrical current. We only move and feel things because of electricity. If they work out sometime in the next 50 years how to just put some electrodes on your head and you can be transported to a digital realm and feel all those sensations, then you're not going to need an actor wearing a tactile suit. Kind of like in Blade Runner 49, when he hires the prostitute to
be the physical embodiment of her.
Of her. Yeah.
It's quite wild.
The possibilities are truly endless. In this book that I was just talking about, there's a group of programmers that have created a completely isolated world where they've put a really base AI on and given them this really alien body and allowed them to exist by themselves. And the only contact they've had with the outside world is this group of programmers. They all they've created their own language, and
basically they're playing God.
They're playing God to see what happens when they create a life and how it learns. And the group of programmers themselves interact with everyone else in the world so little that they've already got like a kind of weird way about them. They're not particularly good socially. They speak their alien language before they even speak English. They're like have kind of gone so far into that. And that's like modern day people being really into World of Warcraft and not having great social skills in real life. You're going to have, like in 1,000 years or whenever this happens, it could be 50 years, it could be 1,000 years, you're going to have a breakaway of groups and of tribes and more specific people that don't interact with each other. There's going to be more, again, it's just fractal. It breaks away. Everyone gets in their own little tribe and never interacts with anyone outside of the tribe, and new cultures are made and probably new languages. And it all just breaks down into the micro. So your life.
But the micro is exactly the same as the macro.
Yeah. Imagine it breaks down to the point where you have a real, this is like the Matrix. You have a baby in the real world, but you're spending so much time in the metaverse because it's the same as the real world essentially. that you have a baby in the real world and they just get jacked in straight away. And they never know that there's a real world and a fake world.
I think all of that, while being exciting, also scares the shit out of me, because there is something that I think is beautiful about, and so like human about what we call the real world. And it's like you miss out on the to see that someone, in 10 generations might miss out on that chance, but they wouldn't know any different. And that's the weirdest thing.
If you had the power to save, say for instance, Leo, our oldest nephew, if you had the power, he's turning 10 in a couple of months. If you had the power to save him from any bullying, existential pain, questions he has, butting into a sexual human, like any of the things that he's going to go through in the next 10 years, would you save him that pain if you could?
No, because that's what makes you human.
Exactly. That's from our point of view, we've gone through our teenage years. Anyone that's gone through their teenage years can go, that was fucking shit. Some people had worse teenage years than others.
It's not that it's shit. It's just like that's where you're
learning a lot of stuff. And
get your legs. You try.
In hindsight, unless you did go through extremely traumatic situations, in hindsight, you can look back on your teenage years and go like, I wouldn't change them because they've made me the person I am today. But imagine if you could cut out all the bad, so you never had to face anything bad. You never had to worry about money. You never had to worry about people being mean to you.
But how are you doing this?
In the metaverse.
But that's the thing. The metaverse isn't like that.
But it could be.
It could, yeah, that's true, actually. Good point.
You could go, oh, I'm going to put a filter on where these words that come up, and anyone that speaks in a tone where their pitch and volume goes over a certain threshold, that instantly puts a smiley face on them and mutes that person. And I'm going to walk around this world, probably seeing a lot of smiley faces, because I just don't, you can censor your own life.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I'm just going to exist and have an entire life where I don't hear anything bad about me or about anything.
On top of that, what kind of art would that being create? It could be really good. It might be really bad. It could be all sorts of things. But these are the possibilities of this new realm you're creating. As in, like, you're going to get inspired. And
does art matter to the point where, I think Rogan spoke about this the other day. He's talked about in The Matrix where Neo gets, he's like, I know Kung Fu. And he gets download Kung Fu. So in this metaverse, we're jacking in. You can just go, I want to buy the knowledge of a piano player.
Yes.
So I want the knowledge of a person that's been playing piano for 1,000 years. Cool, I can play piano for 1,000.
Yeah. Does that have any worth?
Does it have the same worth as someone who's been playing for 50 years? And does it have the same value? I would argue that it would probably be similar to a rich kid who gets anything that they want, gets a Ferrari, and it's like, whatever, I got like 4 of them. Doesn't matter. The value goes down. And so the value of life would suddenly go down.
Unless you could program it so it felt like you had been learning for 1,000 years.
Exactly. So that brings me back to the point where anyone can do anything that they want and have anything that they want. Suddenly, someone introduced to the metaverse a game that's really simple. It's a wood chopping game. Or you know what? It's actually just a plot of physical land that we haven't let overgrown. That's this really picturesque spot, and you can go there for 2 hours and breathe real air and chop wood for 2 hours. And that suddenly becomes the most popular game. And so
exactly.
our metaverse, which we now accept as the real universe, and our original universe, which is the real universe, now is seen as the metaverse. And now suddenly all these digital things are porting back to the real.
Yeah,
and then someone goes, man, lots of people are porting back to the real world. We should create a game that's just like the real world, except it still exists in the digital world.
Yeah.
And so that's when something like what we're living in now gets created. Who remembers what it used to be like? We used to have cars, and there used to be restrictions, and people used to say mean things, and there used to be wars, and there used to be all this terrible stuff. Okay, let's all program all that in. Now let's all jack into that. And then suddenly that becomes the most popular game. And then someone goes, you know what's even funner? If we forget that we're playing a game.
And you're back to where you
And now we're back to
before.
where we are.
Yeah. Well,
it seems like an inevitable cycle that we're just going to keep oscillating through. But all this, as much as the technology might be close, I think about it might work in America or China.
But our broadband's not good enough? Just kidding.
Or like Western developed wealthy nations.
Mm-hmm.
But what does this mean for somewhere like Africa?
I think it means that they
or the
become
Middle East.
In some way, as more people leave the real world, there'll be more opportunities in the real world.
Yeah. And it also means that what if everyone's jacked in America and people go, all these idiots are living in the digital world, I'm going to go and
overtake their real world
because they don't value it enough. It's almost like globally we all have to agree and have access. It's also going to create more wealth disparity and privilege disparity because this access to technology, at least in the beginning and probably for a while, is going to be a rich person's game. But
absolutely.
Not unlike making music 20 years ago was you had to have 50 grand to buy all the kit.
Not 50 grand, but
and now you can buy a laptop. I mean, you can buy a laptop for $2,000 and Ableton for $1,000, and you can make a pop record in your bedroom. It'll become more accessible, but fuck, so many things have to line up for that to be.
So many things do line up, man. That's the crazy thing.
But also, in the end of the day, who's controlling? There's going to be a time when decentralization has to be centralized to a certain degree, especially if there's a universe that we're all agreeing to.
That already happens in this world. Think of it as, one bank is a bit rogue, two banks, and then they're like, hey, we need to get part of a thing and we need to make some agreements.
There's always
laws and governments.
There's always a daddy.
You're blowing my fucking mind. And I think if you've stayed with us this long, then salute you.
Use the code word Metaverse at short order for your fucking 10% off in store now.
Yeah, do it. Thank you for listening. My head hurts a little bit, and I'm not sure if we really fine-tuned on the point, but yeah, have a look. It doesn't
I think we
matter.
just said it's fucking crazy. Life is crazy. Pretend it's a video game because the chances are it probably is a video game.
Yeah, and
so go take that chance that you
do some research. Look up things like Roblox,
Roboblock.com.
Decentraland. It's worth Googling.
Also,
and just like Google what the metaverse is, and then read some articles because there's more and more people and real companies are investing in this shit, and it's fucking wild. I love you.
I love you too, buddy.
And I love you, the listener. Thank you for listening. Like and share and do all those things so that we can exist in this world and the next.
Peace be with you.
And also with you.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast. Make sure you subscribe to us on your podcast app and keep up to date with all new episodes. They're going to be coming out once a week. We are Ekko and Sidetrack on Facebook and Instagram. On Twitter, we are Ekko Sidetrack. Go listen to our music on Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, YouTube, or wherever your ears consume happiness. Lots of love, people.